I am here to introduce our third session of our second season of Unrehearsed Futures. There were 20 sessions last year, and this is the third session this year. I'm here with my esteemed co-curators, Mbongeni Mtshali, Mwenya Kabwe, and Jihan Manek Shah. Two in Cape Town, one in Mumbai, one in Hobart, Tasmania. And we're sure that you're all over the world. Very exciting to have you here. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to introduce Mbongeni, whose first session this is as curator. And without further ado, Mbongeni, I'm going to hand it over to you. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you so much, Amy, and hello, everyone. Lovely to see so many familiar faces in the room and people who've come back in from previous conversations. Yeah, and this is my first curated session, and I'm very excited to be joined by my co-curator, Mwenya Kabwe, with whom I work in Cape Town, who is going to be riding shotgun with me on this particular session. But more importantly, our interlocutors for today, Tony Miyambo and Phala or Phala. I'm going to hand over to Tony and Phala to introduce themselves before I get the conversation going with our first question. Tony, do you want to tell us a little about yourself, please, sir?
Hi, my name is Tony Bonani Miyambo. I am an actor, producer, semi-director when I get the opportunity. And quite recently more of a writer. I'm the performer and co-producer of the play Kafka's Ape alongside Phala or Phala, and I am based in Johannesburg.
Thank you, Tony. Phala?
Good morning, good evening. I don't know, where in the world other people are. It could be, different times. My name is Phala, Okedi Phala, and I'm a storia. And I'm the animator at the Center for the Less Good Idea. And what do I also? I also do, everything in between, storying and, and I've directed and adapted the play, which is the subject matter of today, Kafka's Ape. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, if there's anything more you want to know, please in the chat I can answer.
Great, thank you.
I have to mention this. I'm sorry. I'm also an artist in residence at the University of the Western Cape. I just need to protect my funding. and mention my supporters.
gotta pay the piper. You have got to pay the piper. Great, thank you to both of you. So I'm assuming that if you are in this room already, you have a pretty good idea of what today's discussion is going to be about. But just in case you don't, we're going to be talking about the production and circulation of live performance under the strictures of COVID-19, and we'll be using the adaptation of Franz Kafka's of what's a Reporter Academy, produced by Phala and Tony, as our kind of linchpin to think about this question of what it means to produce live performance digitally or to adapt it digitally for presentation during the pandemic. And I guess the key questions we want to kind of think about is what effects this might have on a form whose rhetorical effects often rely on the transparency of the body's performance labor, its materiality, its context, and its liveness. Because this show in particular is so much about the physical presence of the performer on stage, giving body to what is ultimately a literary text. And I think this raises interesting questions then about the kind of effects on the performance itself when we suddenly don't have that immediacy of the live encounter. And that's where our question is going to be circling around, is thinking about theatre making, the opportunities and perhaps limitations of reimagining a live form for kind of a digitally distanced presentation. So I guess a good place to begin, Tony, and I'm going to throw it back to you here, is to begin by thinking a little more about what it is you perceived that people took from Kafka's Ape, and why this particular play at this time. I mean, lest we forget, it's an adaptation of a very old literary text, and an emphatically European one at that. But this adaptation has been taken up globally in really exciting ways and in really diverse spaces. So I'm interested firstly in thinking a little more about what it is that you think drew people to Kafka's Ape, and what kind of maintained, a kind of global fascination with this particular adapted performance.
Well, I mean, in order to answer that question, I think we need to be quite open about the fact that for the first few years of the play's life, people didn't take to it. It was in all intensive purposes, a failure. We mounted the work first towards Phala's master's at Wits University. And obviously there was a motivated audience to come see the show, in that the show was free and the show was basically a student work that was open to other students. And so we had an audience at that point. And then our next opportunity, we were chosen to be part of the schools festival at the National Arts Festival. And even then there's a measure of a kind of a guaranteed audience, in the fact that there'll be people that come from other universities that come to see the work, and people that come to grade the work in particular way, because the student fest is in competition. At which point we decided to take the project on in our personal capacity. And that's when the real world reality kind of hit us, in that in Joburg, there was not a good following in terms of the audiences that we were able to generate, partly because at around the same time, there was another version produced at the State Theatre, which didn't really do so well. So, and with a prominent actor, and I felt like people at that point felt like, if this prominent actor can't do this text justice, then who is this little thin, scrawny boy that's attempting to do this text? We then took the work to Grahamstown for a number of years. And again, very difficult to get audiences in, a lot of canceled shows, a lot of disappointment. And Phala and I had to come back and go and really ask ourselves the difficult question around, is this a project we feel needs to carry on? Do we have the capacity between us to keep trying to make the project work? This was in 2014 that we had that difficult conversation. And our agreement at that point was that we would give it one more year, one more try, to see if we could do anything. And then we changed the name of the play, because at that point, when you go to Grahamstown, if your play goes to Grahamstown for a number of years, then it stops being in competition in terms of the fringe, what the fringe can award, because then it's kind of seen as a legacy project that never worked out in Grahamstown. So we changed the name, we changed a few of the things in the play, and then we went back in 2015. And again, audiences weren't great, but for some reason that year, somebody recognized the play and we won a Silver Ovation Award. We won a prize to go perform in Amsterdam. And I think that's really kind of when the swing for the life of the play took another turn, because at that point, opportunities then opened up in ways that we'd never imagined before. So I think it's at that point that Phala and I also realized that part of the problem was in the limited ways in which we had thought of staging the work and where it was possible to stage the work. And so the economics of it came into play when one started to realize that the amount of money we spent trying to get to Grahamstown, trying to mount the performance in Joburg, is comparably almost the same in terms of other opportunities that we could pursue outside in the world. So we then put a list together, what we call our hit list of festivals, of spaces, of places that we thought we need to go all of a sudden we built relationships in Cape Town that allowed us to go stage a performance there. There, the show was very well received. It sold out. It got other opportunities, like the opportunity to go perform in Chicago. So the model of the show has been partly what we're able to produce in our personal capacities, and partly been invited into spaces that have the kind of resources that we don't. But what we also do when we are invited into a space, for example, when we went to Prague, which was a partly funded a trip, Phala and I then said, you know, in order to get to Prague, the flight connects through Dubai. What is in Dubai? And so we reached out to over 40 performance spaces in Dubai, and one happened to answer us, and that was the Junction Theatre.
I think I'm gonna shift because I think I'm losing people.
Okay.
Hello?
We can hear you. Is it me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you?
Tony, you're fine.
Okay.
And I think Phala was fine too, but we'll get him back.
Yeah. But also a bit long-winded more, but it's been a mixed model. And I think what people, I'm still to find, I know people appreciate the quality of the performance. They appreciate the simplicity and the messaging behind the performance. I'm not quite sure why it's kept on having the kind of life that it has. But I think part of it has to do with kind of this mixed model and the resilience that we've built into the show, and also the simplicity of in the way that we've packaged the show that's allowed it to be an easy show to pack up and move around. The show quite literally fits into 2 bags and can go anywhere in the world. And I've also had to learn the skill set of the director, of the technician. So I travel alone everywhere I go in the world. I move the show in, I plot it, I perform it. That's been one of the things that's made it possible for us to fund the show in a way that's simple to take around the world. And I think the more eyes the more people see the show, the more opportunities the show gets. And not relying on mainstream funding has freed us from chasing the conventional tour circuits or the conventional tour headspace that could have limited and caused the death of a show a long time ago, if that was the case.
Great, thank you, Tony. Phala's back with us, great. So it seems that there's something vital in terms of what you learned from the initial, I guess, lack of success of the show, the couple of years that you kind of twisted in the wind with it, that you've managed to take forward in order to make this work successful and to kind of circulate it globally, right, among a global audience. And that seems to be related to how you and Phala have both positioned yourselves as independent producers or freelancers who aren't quite sitting within the kind of traditional frameworks of either the receiving houses where you would have gotten space or are fighting for space, competing for space for here, or the festival circuit. And I think that there's a lot of kind of potential insights there that will help us think through a little more carefully how to respond to this moment when receiving houses and festivals and so forth have had to completely radically reimagine what the practice of staging theatre looks like. So I wondered if we could lean a little more into that idea of what the independent space allows us to begin imagining that's different to these histories that we've come from of relying on formal theatre spaces and of relying on the kind of normal, often gate-kept, right, points of access to these spaces that in other instances would have given this work a kind of life that you had to achieve for yourself, right?
Phala, do you want to take this or should I go? Is he there?
Yes, I'm here. I seem to be experiencing a little bit of internet issue, so I had to move from the office to the theater. So I'm standing behind the tree. I mean, the tree's behind me here, yeah, in the theater. So I missed, part of, what Tony was saying while Esther was switching. But I mean, for me, the thing that was important to know and understand is the kind of paradigm shift that we needed to engage in. And that paradigm shift was also based on the fact that, the realization that we are dealing with an adaptation, and dealing with this adaptation forces us also to adapt. We need to also understand that, there's an adaptation that we need to do. One of the reasons why, and we changed the title outside of the reasons that Tony gave, we realized that naming it the way that we named was was not catchy, marketing wise. It wasn't revealing that it's, a Kafka related work. There was all those kind of things that we were losing in, Kafka enthusiasts and stuff. So we decided, to find a way in which we can recapture that audience, and find a new imagination to it. So the thought process of the model that we're talking about was, what I would refer to, as the collapse of, the mainstream thought or the mainstream fallacy that we had as students, that, the only way to make work is when the theaters call on you and to stage, the work. That's when you have arrived. That's when, you can be known and all those, stuff. So we needed to, I think the harsh realities of what we thought the so-called industry is like, we thought about it in a very, formal transactional way, in the sense that there's somebody who needs to call you, to do something. And the moment we realized that we needed, the call is upon ourselves, and that the industry is not elsewhere but within ourselves, that we are part of the industry, and that the agency of industrialization anyway is the people and their needs and the demands, and that's when the shift started, happening. Of course, we can't, lie and say there hasn't been opportunities that have been, presented by, for example, the Grahamstown Festival in that kind of way. But it came also at a cost, of us, you pay to be in the festival, you pay your own accommodation, you do that. So we realized that we are actually, independently producing this show without, even us having a budget for it. So now we started to say, no, we need to think about it, so we are producers here. Oh, okay. So we're not just the director, adapter, and actor. We are now, the producers of the work. So we needed to think like producers. So what do producers do? They look for opportunities. What do producers do? They look for money, they look for budget, they spend, a time cracking their heads around what this thing is. And because we believed in the product, and those who have watched it also believed in it, we were like, okay, we've got a good product to sell. How do we sell this product? And the moment we started traveling, a show would normally require, a properly funded show will require that, an actor, a stage manager, and the director sometimes to travel with the show. But from early on, we knew that it would be difficult to do, all that full travel on, a self-producing budget. So one of the things that we started doing was, how do we cut down costs? Phala is not going to travel with the show, but what do I do as the director? Because what happened is that we knew that stage management was going to be an issue as well. So I was the lighting designer for the show. I was the director for the show. I was the stage manager for the show, and the designer for the show. So I took on all these roles. And then after, doing it, I used to say to Tony, there's a cost advert that Tony didn't do. He didn't pay his due diligence in crewing. Because he was staying in Tembisa, he didn't crew. So a lot of things I had to now do them myself. No, Tony, this is not how you hold a paintbrush. This is what you do. This is, so there was a lot of teaching that you need to go in there. And then that meant me designing, the lighting and the lighting plan so that it is easier to send, to the theaters that we are performing in. I have a little bit of graphic design. It is not the lighting plan that, that is quite elaborate, made on AutoCAD and other things that, lighting designers do. No, it is a basic, plan. The light goes here, and then the other ones we need special here. It's a basic drawing, but it's understood. Our lighting technician here at the center was showing me how best to improve that, because I always use it. I said, this is the master plan. You can't beat this. It has worked everywhere in the world. So now what we started doing is that it was also a transference of responsibility. The things that so Tony had to be an actor and a lighting plotter of the show at the same time. He had to be his own stage manager when it is required. Why? Because we're saving on travel costs, we're saving on accommodation, on food, in order for us to make this thing happen. So there are a number of things that we need to think like business people, think about what this product is and how we want, and what kind of profiteering, making profit can we do. So we created a little bit of our stock exchange, between Tony and I, and say, this is how, the dividends are going. Tony becomes the financial manager of the show. I was the financial manager at the beginning. Now Tony is the financial manager. Why is he the financial manager? He's the one traveling with the show. He doesn't need to call me and say, this is the monies that we need to do. He needs to make decisions on the spot about the kind of costs that are related to the show. So I can't be in South Africa and be a holder of finances, and create a bureaucratic system within this value system. And that's how it goes about, so and some of the negotiations and how we go about it is that we don't have a hierarchy, because we also learned that hierarchy kills things. You have to take decisions, you have to sit and take decisions. So if Tony meets somebody who wants the production, Tony negotiates. If Phala meets somebody who wants Phala negotiates. It's as simple as that. So to kill that hierarchy also was a way of thinking about this model that works for us. And at the core of this model is trusting. It's trusting that the other person is equally invested as you. You are equal partners in this thing, and that's how it has then moved, and that's how we had adapted. I mean, one of the things that I like about adaptation, and I've learned from this production, is that adaptation is simply, if one was to define it in their own words, a process of making something for a new use, or for a new purpose, or modifying something.
Yeah.
So that kind of modification. Sorry.
So I just want to say, I wanted to lean into that idea a little more, if I may, because
you could
exactly to exactly the next question I wanted to ask, and I said that Alex Sutherland just picked it up in the chat as well, is this question of the adaptation and the shift, right, that you're pointing out, is making this thing fit for a different kind of use, a different kind of audience. So much of what makes this particular production work, and I'm hearing this echoed in Alex's question as well, are the questions of form, right? It's the aesthetic choices that you made, which you've explained, are grounded in very pragmatic questions around financing, around the ease of travel. But the happy consequence of that in some ways is that it produced something very, very particular that I think had not been experienced in relation to this kind of text in many of the spaces to which you went. So my question, I'm wondering if both you and Tony, as the director and as the performer, could speak a little more about the form of the work, and as as Alex said, how you think these specific choices contributed to the initial audience response, and how that response then grew. Yeah.
Okay, just in the trail of thought that was in, speaking about the adaptation and coming to answer the question, is that the kind of adaptation that we had adopted, which was also just in the production itself, was about specificity. And specificity for me is the quality of a belonging or relating uniquely to a particular subject. you know, and localizing, you know, the knowledge. So what had happened was that we find ourselves, you know, straddling the economics of the production and the economy of the production. And the reason why I say economics, you know, and the economics is the money. The economy of the production is the minimalistic way in which we needed to do stuff, you know. So we took all the clutter away. You know, as a director, I had to think about, you know, the work, the relationship of the work, where we want the work to go, and the relationship of my directing and how the work influenced my directing and how my directing influenced the work into the economics of the work. So simply put, what we only used what was necessary in the production. All right. A prop like a hat will become 4 things. Right? It's firstly, it's functional, you know, thing. You know, he wears it. That's a functional thing. You know, he holds it to show a symbol of, you know, respect. He throws it to show the emotional value of it. A stick will become a gunshot. It will become the, you know, the cage. The podium is collapsible. We came from a big podium to a small podium, you know, that is packable in Tony's luggage bag. So now we had to think about how is this thing collapsible and buildable in order for, you know, to allow traveling, but also how is it still, you know, relevant to the production without taking away from the production. So a number of props, like even the backdrop itself, we use it, you know, as a backdrop, but we also use the structure and the frame of it, you know, as a way of showing, you know, the kind of the, you know, the violence of institutionalization and all that. So things have then, you know, the triple, fourple meaning, if you can say. So that's how, you know, the economy of, you know, the work then comes into the adaptation aspect of it. So it requires that Tony and I think differently about the production. We strip it down, we make it simpler, it's travelable. And then from there, on the other side, on the economic side of it, is that only what is needed should go, not what is wanted. I may want to travel, but I cannot travel because of A, B, C, D. So that model became, you know, a thing that is a hybrid, you know, between the product and the application of the product in the market, if one was to use those kind of words. So there was an influence, you know, cross influence around, you know, how we approach the work. That's why for me it was such a paradigm shift. You know, it was such a collapse of the things that I knew, but it was also a very positive collapse. It wasn't a negative collapse in any way. You know, we paid our dues in terms. I wouldn't have had it any different. The way in which it happened, you know, has shaped, you know, the director that I am and the story that I am today. And when it comes to, you know, and those are the things. And then also understanding that your performer is not somebody who you have cast in a play. They are more than just, you know, a performer. They are a custodian of the performance itself. And that, you know, they've got, you know, a say in how, you know, the performance develops. There's an approximation that is needed there. You know, there's a kind of a thing that is needed. There's a give and take that is, you know, one needs to understand. And for me, that was key in understanding, and it was easier, you know, and perhaps this is a model that cannot be replicated because Tony and I were friends, you know, so maybe it works with friends, or maybe it kills friendships, we don't know, you know. So you know, so
I see
so
Tony shake his head vigorously on the other side of
no, I'll tell
screen.
you why he shakes his head. It's because he has embezzled funds. This is what this is what we call friendship tax. And also that's the other thing that I want to speak about, you know, because the other thing is that bureaucracy teaches you that you need to account for every cent as in terms of this is where the cent is spent. But what bureaucracy doesn't teach you is that there's also, you know, a kind of there's a gain in a looseness of, you know, a budget when there's trust in the fact that the money is being used for the right purpose. And also the thing that I wanted to put in there is that, which is key, is that we have also needed to at times budget for Tony's, or allow for Tony's health to be part of this, budget, so that it does not sit outside of the performance. When he's not feeling well, the production, and he's doing the production must be able to pay for Tony's, because Tony's not on medical aid. That's what artists are like. We need to find, funds within this, not as part of taking away from his payment, but to say, here we are, this is the problem that we are solving, we are facing, this is how we need to do. And I needed to get out, sorry, Mbongeni, I needed to get out, to speak about, the model and, the kind of things that adaptation here has taught us. It has
Sure.
taught us to adapt, yes.
Lovely.
Tony?
Thank you. And again, we'll circle back to the kind of lessons that we learned from adaptation as a form itself. But Tony, I wonder if you could reflect for a little for us on what it was like to be on the inside of this process as a performer, and how this way of working perhaps challenged you to write. Phala's spoken beautifully about this relationship between the economics and the aesthetic economy of the performance. I'm wondering whether you had to kind of make similar adjustments as a performer, imagining how to embody this role, and whether it was a similar case of stripping down, or finding different ways of manifesting that layering without the kind of bells and whistles of the conventional theatrical apparatus to kind of carry you through the process.
I mean, the very early days, when Phala first approached me to do the work, he gave me the text and he said, go read it. I came back. He said, do you think you could do that? I said, not in a million years. There's not a chance I'd be able to do that. And he cast me there on the spot. He says, and that's exactly why I've cast you to do the play. And then rehearsal started the following day when I was sitting at lunch and he gave me an orange. I tried to open it and he said, no, but open it like an ape. So our game then became around food and how to consume food like the animal. At that point, I was going through a really tough time at Wits because I really didn't have the money to be at Wits. And Phala understood this, and he understood how food was important for me at that point because it's something that I didn't have. And so the early relationship was around nurturing and taking care of me and my body in order to prepare it to the place where it was able to do what it needed to do for the show. So I was very spoiled early up. I was coddled in the early years. I didn't touch a nail or a hammer or any kind of anything that could, that could damage my hands. I did not touch. And then when we moved into the kind of private producing space, things became progressively more and more difficult, because now one not only had to think about the performance, and really at that point is when I think I started to understand that just the performance as a professional production, just knowing that the performance is good isn't good enough. It's also about the opportunities that you can create and find and leverage to make sure that what it is that you are building in the performance can be seen by the people who will allow the work to continue to have a further life. And so what became interesting is in this process of adaptation, Phala's talked about the things that he took away when he realized that we had to take away the things that we didn't, the things that we wanted in order to preserve the things that we needed. For me as a performer inside of the piece, that was perpetual loss, because I come from a show that had more than I had in this moment now, when I'm looking for the thing that used to be around my neck that's no longer there, because Phala says we no longer need it. It was perpetual loss and perpetual mourning for me, because those things are things that as a performer you start to depend on, you start to trust that this is what it is. But Phala, on the other hand, then started to nourish the emotional aspect of it, which was to say that everything that you do, everything, the capacity that you've been building up as a performer is enough. This thing that you crave, that you're constantly reaching for, is not what you need to sustain the performance. And so the switch for me as a performer was to then trust the things that I had naturally in me and the things that we had cultivated within our process, but also to understand that the performance doesn't only start when the show starts and the audience is in the auditorium. For me, the performance starts from the moment I pack up that 45-kilogram bag and I strap it across my shoulder and I put my clothes alongside my set and other weird set pieces that could get me arrested at the airport because people think I'm trying to smuggle some sort of gun or bomb into the country. That for me, the performance is throughout. You know, I remember, you know, is the surreal feeling of when we went to perform in New York. You know, people think Broadway, they think lights, they think, you know, this is it, you've made it in a particular way. My experience of New York was arriving in a very cold and harsh city and lugging across a 40-kilogram bar set piece and my own 20-kilogram bag through the New York subway and getting lost for 2 hours before having to get to the venue, having to put my clothes down and quickly head to the Broadway venue that wanted to charge me $300 in order to have me build my set inside, the set which I need for the performance on stage. And so I had to build my set on the sidewalk of the New York theater, and then I had to be reprimanded by police because they didn't understand what I was doing. So by the time you get on stage, you're carrying all of that with you. And Red Peter is a character that's speaking about how to locate oneself within adversity, within perpetual struggle. How it is that even though when you know that the change that I'm making is not necessarily for the betterment of me, I need to make it because I need to survive. Then when you think about all of these other things that you experience alongside the show, you understand why the show becomes palpable. People, to me, I say to people all the time, you know, I meet particularly young students that want to do the work, and they ask me, what do I need to think about it? I said, I really can't help you think about how you want to make the show, because my experience of the show has been a rehearsal that's taken, that's spanned 10 years. And that's ebbed and flowed in particular ways. In terms of rehearsal time in a show, you can't beat that, but you need to chart your own way and your own understanding to make it work for you. Because what Phala and I have done, we've just simply found a way to make it work for us. It wasn't always easy, wasn't always ideal, but it was necessary.
Thank you, Tony. I love this idea that your experience of your own life, of working to stage this show, you talk about, you know, this 10-year rehearsal. I would add that perhaps that rehearsal has been a rehearsal you've been, you know, in since birth, given the content of the work and what you're bringing to it. And I think Amy asks a really interesting question here, or makes an observation. And she says that it seems that you're practicing a kind of relational aesthetics in the making of this show, where your form and the process of what you're making is also its expression and its effects on the world. And I love this example that you're giving about what happens before you arrive on stage in New York, because in such palpable ways, it's almost like a kind of metaphorization, as you pointed out, of what Red Peter experiences, in this sense of both being at the center of the very thing, but always held at the peripheries as well. I guess the question that I'm coming to from there is wondering, did you feel that Red Peter was experienced distinctly differently in a place like New York or Chicago, as opposed to Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, global south versus global north. I'm interested in how the different locations perhaps shaped that experience as well.
Of course, most definitely. I mean, Red Peter in Chicago, as you know, Mbongeni was very confused because here I was on a trip that was fully paid for. The university put me up in a hotel. For all of a sudden, you know, unlike the usual way in which we produce our own tours, is I would arrive the day before, then the following day I'm already on stage plotting, doing something towards the show. In Chicago, I had 3 days just to rest and sleep. I was confused.
And the cold.
And I can't the cold. I remember even reaching out to you guys and saying, guys, I'm here. The hotel is nice. It's got a nice bed. Is there anything I should be doing? Because I'm looking at the schedule and there's nothing that I should be doing, you know? And so that experience but it's also important because for the first time I sat back and I went, and actually it's a moment when Mamela Nyamza was also there at the same time. She reached out to me. She said, I'm here. I hear you're here. I'm going to go to the gym. Do you want to come gym with me? And here I was in a gym in a hotel in Chicago. I'm running alongside Mamela Nyamza, who I've never spoken to in my life. And I know this woman is prolific in very particular ways. And it just hit me with, yeah, man, I'm important. Yeah, I'm worthy of, I can rest. I can be in a nice bed and order room service because I'm worthy. That experience in itself is the other polar opposite of the struggle, but still also important. Whereas a trip to Rwanda, for example, which wasn't about money, the tour to Rwanda, there was no money to be had. But Phala and I said, if there's anywhere where it's important for us to go perform the show, it's a festival that's located inside the Rwandan Genocide Memorial. A festival that's about tolerance and about understanding otherness in very particular ways, which has always been our struggle chasing. So Rwanda for us was a very spiritual journey, and going there, sitting in an amphitheater with 400 people, and right behind you are the remains of 500,000 people that were slaughtered in the Rwandan genocide, is a completely different sense and sensibility, right? In South Africa, Phala and I have worked more and more to make my experience of doing the show comfortable. The older I get, the more he's insisted that so in places where costs are an issue, we always cost everything. Everything has a cost variation. So even if I'm going to Australia and there's a benefactor that will provide for my meals, those meals, yes, are given to us at no cost, but we still factor in that cost. And we're clear around what the saving was at this point, what the sacrifices we have to make are at this point. For example, my Australian tour last year, you know, was over a 6-week period in Perth and in Adelaide. In Perth was a different experience because I was living with a very wealthy family that supported me in incredible ways, you know, but I also credited them as part producers of that tour leg, you know, in all of the kind of the media and conversations that I was having, because I want people to understand the value of what they've given to the work. And that doesn't always have to be in money. That can be a meal, that can be a bed to sleep on, that can be a myriad of things. And because of that, because of the way in which we're able to understand and accept value across the world, wherever we go, you know, that's produced a model that has become sustainable, but has also provided the seed money to carry on in the work that we need to do. You know, for example, now what's happening at the center of the Less Good Idea is we had received a standing invitation in Canada and at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And the Canadians said, look, we wanted to have you here anyways. We had budgeted for you. would you mind exploring your show in an online format? Phala and I said, we haven't really been thinking about online digital theater, but for you, we'd be willing to experiment. So I was laughing yesterday when we're having our talk with them. I said, this performance now at the Center for the Less Good Idea for the University of Toronto is one very expensive experiment. Nobody knew how it would turn out. Nobody knew if it would work. But we've built the kind of relationships where people believe in us and make us, and they're willing to put in the money to say, we're willing to find out and see where it goes. And from that point, the Center for the Less Good Idea said, well, you're already here. You already moved in the show and set up in very particular ways. Ours is to leverage the opportunities that we have to create other opportunities. The center said, stay on for 2 more performances. Let's open up the opportunity for people to see the show in South Africa, here in Joburg, where people have been calling for the show to return. And then at that point, a moment of Kafka season was arranged alongside other smaller works that the center has been involved in making that are inspired or from Kafka's writings. And that's really it's been a joy to see how a small idea can flower and create other opportunities in ways that one had never imagined before. And our whole touring cycle has been around that. And in fact, we've just realized that the only continent which we haven't touched with the show is Asia. And there are conversations that are ongoing there because we feel that this is the work that its impulse has always been to take it to the people who haven't seen it yet. Somebody asked me yesterday, are you bored of the show? I said, well, how can you be bored when there's 7 billion people in the world and you've only had a couple of thousand see the show? The work is not done. We need to take the work elsewhere. And that's kind of my ethos and my energy and drive around what it is that's required to push the work forward.
Lovely, thank you. Phala Antonia, I mean, so I guess that's as good a place as any to kind of segue to my next question, which is around this current moment that Red Peter and Kafka's 8th play itself is going through, which is this transition and experiment, I guess, with the digital format or a digital presentation of the show. Could you tell us a little about how that's going, what you're discovering, what you are loving and or hating about that, and how that's also maybe shaping how you're thinking about future iterations of the work and its capacity to travel?
I mean, the thing about my relationship with the thing called online theater is that there's nothing like online theater as a genre. You can't take a vehicle for the form and name it as the thing that makes the theater. Is that theater has always embraced technology one way or the other. Lighting is technology, the sound, we have always embraced technology. So it's not like theater abhors technology. We've used projectors, we've used all sorts of things in the theater as an embrace of technology. We have even the first people to complain about LED lightings were theater people. It's like, these things are not working. They're not giving us the quality we want. Make it better. And that has improved LED quality, because the theater people were complaining, this thing is buffering too much. Can you give me something cleaner? And now the conversation between that, you see theater influencing technology, in that kind of way, because they get the feedback. The other people in Disco Lights, they don't care about how the lighting, how long it takes, and how it changes color. We are very specific about what we want. And that has helped, those who make, the LEDs to be, to do that. So for me, my approach has always been that the form itself, theater, can live in any space. We've seen theater going into the gallery. Theater can, for me, it is an animate exhibit. If one was to, it's an exhibition that is animated. That's how I approach theater. Is that's why you find it can happen anywhere. We have proposed to display in the planetarium. We've proposed to do it in museums, because that's we don't think of the theater as in the space alone, that it's, this vehicle that we're carrying, needs to adapt. I'll go back to the adaptation, in that kind of way. And then if it fails to adapt in spaces, then it's meant for one thing. It's not meant for, any other thing, and things that are meant for themselves, they die quite quickly. So now when we are given a space to say, experiment with this online thing, we know that the thing that is important there is what the opportunity that the internet offers us, the opportunity that, the camera offers us. But the thing that I found quite important in this online thing was sound. Was very critical, because we always think of sound as amplification of things, but sound as a collection of things. It was important for me to brief, the sound designer and say to him, Zane, I want to hear every breath that Tony breaks, because that is the thing that is going to connect him to the audience. I don't want to hear him in an ambient way. I want people to feel like when he's breathing, they are breathing with him. If you can do that for me, collect sound in that kind of a way, then I'll be, very interested in, because I know how I connect with, performance. Is that breath for me is one of the key things that, gives you access to emotion, gives you access to the character itself. And for me, I said, well done, when one person in our Tuesday performance said, oh, the breathing techniques of the actor are so brilliant. I said, yes, you got what I wanted. That's exactly, the thing that I wanted. And then also what we do is to also bring the skills. Tony is also a television actor. He does adverts, he does other things, and he's also done television himself. So he knows how to deal with the camera. He knows where the camera is. So connecting with the camera and making sure that you're looking right into the camera so that the person who's experiencing on the other side, knows that you're looking at them, just like you're looking at the audience, or some of this, the skills that we're playing with. And for me, it is an opportunity. I don't think, the digital form collapses the theater. What it does is that we can still find, a relatable connection. Of course, it's not a physical connection. We are not under the pretense that we are creating a physical connection in that kind of way. We know the limitations, of what we are dealing with. And it's a limitation presented as it would be by a space when you think, you go into the back, that is different kind of stages, the market theater or wherever, sometimes the Alexandra bar was always a small space, intimate in that kind of way. You use it, with what it comes with, So I always say in the word, a space, there's pace, it's S pace and there's ace. So you need to find the ace of that, space. So whenever we're given, opportunities, that's what we do. What is the gem? What is the thing that we need to learn from this thing, and how can we maximize it? And that is why, as Tony was speaking about also the aspect of co-producing and people contributing to the show. That's the kind of specificity that we speak about. It's not only in the aesthetic form, but it's also in knowing that at particular point, in time, there's a localization of things. There are people who are contributing in particular ways, to what you are doing, and it's important. It's very important to do that, and also the thing for me is that when you think about work in a holistic way, you're using everything that is available to you. You're ever looking for what opportunities are there. For us, it was a blessing. I mean, Tony kept on saying, damn it, this is scary. We've got so many people. There's a lighting person, there's a sound person, there's, camera people, qualified cinematographers, doing this, all those kind of things. It's like, what have we done? This is overwhelming. This is a one-man show that has got 8-10 people, attending to it. And the other thing that we have, the opportunity that I think everybody needs to harness, is that the online and the distancing that has created, because people crave human connection so much, it has unlocked some money as well. And it has unlocked some money because some people want to be found to be doing something, or they really are genuinely craving a connection. And also the model that we are seeing now is that here we are supposed to be in Canada. That meant flights, accommodation, and food, all right? All of a sudden that travel is not there outside of our fees and that. So now this money can be turned into the money to do an online producing. And what online gives you then is the record. You can record it, it is there, it lives there as a record that you can then begin to see how best do I use this record, as a case study to send to people, sell it as a product, all those kind of things are there. So there's now money that is sitting that was planned for travels that can now be, appropriated for something else. That is ever, the kind of the shifting of the economics that is happening there. So there's an opportunity. The money is being freed. Now the airlines are crying, but we are benefiting. And that's what it is. So and the hotels are crying, we are benefiting. And that's the thing that we need to to find and influence and really speak about, because for me is that all the time, if you're looking at things from a point of sameness and not just the point of difference, you'll reach a common ground. There's a line in the play that says experience is not what happens to someone, but what someone does with what has happened to them. And this has been the kind of the driving force of the production, in the sense that all the experiences, we want to turn them. And there's another line that says, the progress is taking the difficult parts, past, and turning them into glorious moments in the present. And for us, that has been the kind of opportunities that we are embracing. We are living, Kafka in a way, because the other thing that I realized quite early is that here, the paradox of this production is that here are human beings in academia who have asked this ape to come and present, to them about, the life of apes when it has lived among human beings, for a long time. And the ape then tells them, no, I no longer remember how the life of an ape is, because, evolution, it has changed. It's no longer, it doesn't understand how apes live anymore. It understands how human beings live. And for me, I was like, damn it, there's Kafka making us realize that knowledge is ever, changing. Knowledge comes from within. Knowledge is shaping itself all the time. Knowledge is not one static thing. And even for us, it cannot be. We need to find a way that all these types of experiences, provides new knowledge for us, just like the ape does. Just like the ape tells its moment of truth, even for us, that's what it should be. And that's the kind of the model, and the collapse, of the mainstream thought and fallacy that has become, the adaptation, the specificity, the approximation, the limitations of what Kafka's ape has become.
And Mbongeni, I think also,
yes.
also just to add to what Phala is saying, I think also there's, there's two things when it comes to embracing kind of the digital and technological opportunities that are present in the way people are making. The one is the reality is that the kind of resources that are required for that kind of inquiry are vast. And so, for people who are trying to create theater in very small and manageable ways, it becomes difficult to, first of all, have the resources to explore in ways that can enable and enhance your work in meaningful ways, But secondly, I experienced, something fantastic at the last National Arts Festival I went to. I went to go watch a program of works under the name Arcade. that was staged in Grahamstown, and it was incredible to me to see people, the way in which people were interacting and also creating meaning from, you know, the use of technology in a way that I identified as a huge gap and as a curiosity in my own making. And so from that experiment coming back into a process now where Phala and I had an opportunity to make a new work, I said to Phala, I want to embrace the use of technology in some way. And we started to explore certain things, and at that point it was nothing just but a desire, you know. But also I do think that there is a space where we need to sit down and think around how is it that we can find simple and manageable ways to create access to resources that can allow people to explore fully. Whether or not the idea works or that inquiry works is another story altogether, you know. And so now coming into a process where there are all of these things at hand, it becomes easier to play in that realm, to play in that world, and to embrace the new things that come. For example, the ape has never been mic'd before, you know, but it's also a weird sensation because the show in itself, the structure of the show doesn't try to conceal anything. Everything is out in the open, you know, and where it matters not where the academy is located. Right now, this is a form of an academy that we are engaging in, you know. And so when you understand that, that frees you up to understand how it is that you can play with the separate mediums, with the bodies in space and with the bodies that are out of space, you know. And so that's been a very interesting journey for me as well. And I don't try to, and I think the beautiful thing about working with institutions and people that don't put the pressure on you for kind of the commercial gains is that you're able to explore in ways that are not pressured, ways that don't attempt to present themselves as perfection, ways that don't limit you because or cause anxiety because you're trying to make the ultimate perfect thing. You're quite open about the fact that you're exploring and you're somewhere on the spectrum of exploration. Some things may work, some things may not, but that doesn't become something that's debilitating, that will destroy the basis of that whole inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, lastly, you know, just adding on Tony's, just quick Mbongeni, is that all the time in whatever that you do, you're trying to create meaning. But the key word in meaning is mean. And in mathematics, mean means average.
Yeah.
You know, which means you will never attain perfection as a human being. You'll always, you know, at least, you know, reach the average. And that's enough. And people will understand.
I really enjoy your playful turns of phrase. I think what I find really interesting about what you've both pointed out here is that in many ways, the way I've been conceptually approaching this turn towards the digital, right, is that we're attempting to approximate the live experience. We're attempting to approximate being in an actual theater. And I think the crucial insight here is that actually it's not so much about approximating an experience that you no longer have access to. It's about leveraging the resources that are in front of you, right? What's within reach, to try and experiment and engender new kinds of experiences that may refer back to that other experience, but that are in and of themselves something completely different. And that's super exciting for me to think about, especially when, you know, our tendency has been to throw our hands into the air and panic about what are we going to do about the liveness of theater? The theater, as you say, continues as a vehicle. It finds spaces, it adapts, right? I'm looking at the time. We have approximately 10 minutes left in the formal discussion. There was a question earlier on that I seem to have skipped past. Jenny Lovell at Melbourne Polytechnic had made a comment about this being a wonderful case study that theatre students should hear about, read about, and talk about. And I 100% agree, Jenny. I wonder if you have anything to offer. I'm assuming that you're an educator as well, about how you're seeing this particular conversation being leveraged in an educational space and these kinds of lessons and how they might inform a teaching practice. And that's by way of opening this conversation up to the room.
Thank you. I made that comment because I teach a one-year course in theatre arts, mostly with young people that have just come from a high school environment and wanting to go to a major drama school, some of them, and some of them are just wanting to go out into the world. And my course is designed as a course where they get experience in understanding a bit more about producing, marketing, and those sorts of things to become an independent theatre maker. But it's just becoming more and more, I'm more and more conscious now, and also great conversation last week from Clara about undoing this idea of perfection and allowing ourselves to start to try to really work students' minds about what is success as a performer, what it's not necessarily monetary. It's not I go to Los Angeles and I become a film star. It's what the work that you do, the way you create, the way you learn, the way you adapt that you've been talking is what we need to be teaching because the spaces are so vast now.
So it's about that kind of plasticity, right? Is that capacity to take the skills and tools that we are already teaching and engaging with within the theatre, and if I understand you correctly, Jenny, is being able to leverage those in spaces beyond that, right? So it's taking the core fundamental kind of thing that makes the theatre work and recognizing its value and taking it seriously.
And that you can get excited and inspired with the digital or with a found space, or to take theatre to wherever you can create it, and to start thinking more broadly and not widening the scope of what is possible rather than keeping it narrow.
Mwenya, I saw you raise your hand and I see the circle's hand is up as well.
Just quickly in response to what Jenny has just shared, and also thank you so much, Phala and Tony. It's having seen their work, it's very cool to hear you reflect on its many journeys, and it's making me think in relation to teaching that there's also something about the value of the iteration and the value of returning to work over and over again, which we don't necessarily do. You know, we tend to bounce from one project to the next, and you know, you've made your production, you're going to move on to the next project and move on to the next project. But so much of the conversation so far has really made me revalue and rethink about returning to things, returning to projects, and what it means to embed adaptation into teaching in a different way, and the real value of being able to revisit something actually, and work on it again in a different context. So I'm appreciating that very much. Thanks.
It's not by chance, Mwenya, that Phala and I have only made, 2 original works over the last 10 years together. We look at each other all the time and we say, listen, dude, you're great and I'm great. There's some money somewhere, let's make something. But we look at each other and go, no, let's keep finishing that other thing that we're doing. That's not by chance at all. And sometimes, it's also about Phala and I, when we do get back into a room, we also play this game, or how are we challenging in each other in this new thing that we're trying to explore. And I really, really appreciate the fact that we've been able to do that. It's a sign of massive respect and love for each other, because, when we're not drawn to the idea of working together just because we have access to each other, but rather that is the thing that we want to do together, the thing that we need to be doing together, is it worthwhile now? I remember I made another one-man show called The Cenotaph of Danwa Muriri. And the first thing I did when I got money for that play is I got excited and I went to go talk to Phala and my other friend Dom about it. And they both said outright, without flinching, no, We will not make this play with you. We know the personal story of you and your father. We do not feel we have the capacity to tell the story with you. Go, you've got money, go out into the world, find somebody that's going to help make this a play. And that's the kind of rapport that we have. And I really appreciate that. And so the return is a wonderful thing to hold on to, but also it's a thing that's negotiated between people who have mutual respect for each other. And the way in which we move forward is always about how is this the next thing that will get us to the next level of where we see ourselves as makers and as people.
Thank you, Tony. Before I go to Lesego, I think Alex Southern has made a really great point here, because in relation to iteration, right? And that it really is about thinking perhaps about rigor in performance, or what rigor in performance practice means. And that we need to think about this maybe as a methodology, and about how to approach depth in work with students, to which I responded in the chat. It's an excellent question. And especially when we live in a moment where access to time seems to be at an increasing premium. Everything is accelerating, and this kind of work seems to me to rely on ignoring the accelerating speed of everything in the world and just being okay with sitting, with dwelling in a moment, and kind of, you know, finding that space to kind of push against those walls. And it is about suspending that kind of rapid onward flow of time in order to just sit with something. Sakho?
Mwenya stole the words right out of my mouth. I think. Thanks, Mwenya. I think what I'm really finding provocative is this idea of mining an idea. Is what is the expiration date of an idea, right? And I think particularly in a teaching space, which translates into the independent workspace as a young maker, is that you just go from project to project, right? It's that you're going to do an adaptation process in the first semester, and then the next thing you're going to, you know, move on to directing a classic, and then the next thing. But I'm just thinking about what it means for one project to carry through the entire year in different spaces. What if you're directing one show for the entire year, but approaching it from the different kind of disciplinary spheres or streams, you know? I think when you're mining, you don't find your first diamond and then move on to the next place. You mine and extract and extract and extract and extract until the land is barren, and then you move on to the next spot. So what might that look like in teaching processes? I also think that this idea of extracting to the fullest, like taking everything out of a thing, is quite evident in the approach to form in the making of the work, in the way the work is presented as well. The way the different elements of the work are used in so many different ways. I mean, one of my students is in the room right now, and they're currently doing an adaptation process as well. And he has the single set piece, but that set piece does absolutely everything. It is a backpack in one moment, it is a bed in another, it is, you know, and he's extracted absolutely every ounce of use from the single set piece. Freddie, go watch Kafka's Ape Again, inspiration. And I think, I think it's about really extracting things to the fullest. And I mean, there are economic challenges because you must go forth and make the next work. But I think it's interesting to think about just iterations of the work, and taking absolutely everything there is out of it, like making Tony set designer, lighting designer, you know, because he has the capacity for all of that. And what does that mean for the future of the director-actor relationship in general? What does it mean for the actor to be more than the actor, and the director to be less than everything?
Yeah. Lesego, thank you so much for that thought. Colleagues, friends, it is now 1:15, which is where the official program ends. But as is the habit with these sessions, we do continue having a lobby chat afterwards. So if you'd like to stay and continue chewing the fat, please do. I also want to quickly, before I let you go, is direct you to Tony and Phala's current run of Kafka's Aid that is going on at the Center for the Less Good Idea. Do either of you want to tell us quickly about that before we let people go?
The performance. Yeah, I mean, we have a performance tonight and at the Center for the Less Good Idea. It's accessible in our website under the bookings or upcoming events bookings, something like that. That's the drop menu. We will also be live streaming it, and we'll also live stream the conversation between myself, Tony, William Kentridge, and Jen Taylor after the performance tonight.
Great,
and then
thank you.
tomorrow we've got the performance as well, alongside other pieces of of Kafka. That is A Common Confusion, A Hunger Artist, Josephine, our singer, the Mouse Folk, and yeah, I think that's, and Kafka's Ape again. So that's what we, so the website, in our YouTube channel, there will be a link on our website where you can go and watch these festivities.
Great, thank you so much. So please make your way to the Center for the Less Good Ideas website, where you should find information about the live streaming of this and other works by our two excellent guests. I can't thank you enough for having joined us today. This was an enriching discussion as usual. It's lovely to see some of the same faces we've seen a couple of times in the room. Welcome back. As I'd said, we're going to carry on hanging out. Please feel free to unmute yourself, unmute your camera. We can have a nice fat kiki. The session is officially adjourned though. Stay behind for the chat.